Dynasty is a game of value. So I can tell you to buy high on Drake May or Tyler Warren or any other star player, but at the end of the day, you need some value wins too. You need to be able to acquire players that will then gain value from the time that you acquire them. Otherwise, you are going to run out of buying power eventually. Your team is going to run out of value and you will no longer be able to compete. So today's video is all about buying low, trying to find some guys you can swing on that have a good chance to increase their value from this point forward. And that can be tough to do in the middle of a season with injuries and bye weeks if you are a contender. If you don't have a lot of surplus value to go around, it's a tough ask, I know, to go out and actively seek players that aren't going to help you right now. So today's video is more naturally geared towards rebuilders. It's going to be easier for them or for you, if you're a rebuilder, to take advantage of these opportunities. But either way, stick around because these are good players to target for any team that can afford it. And inconvenient truth time, a lot of potential hopeful playoff teams are going to be looking ahead to 2026 within the next few weeks. So you might as well be ahead of the curve. You might as well know these names going into it. My name is Paul. This is Pure Potential. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment. Let's get into it. Now, I want to throw a ton of names at you today. So we're going to work in categories and I won't go super in depth on every single guy, but I will touch on all these names and I'll absolutely zoom in on some of the less obvious trade candidates here. Right at the top though, we're going to go with a tried and true method for buying low and building dynasty value, and that is buying injured players, especially star players. I know firsthand when you have a Malik Neighbors, you have an Amarian Hampton, and you are backed against the wall. Your team is 3-3. You're trying to stay afloat. Maybe you don't have your own first-round pick. The temptation to ship off one of those elite young players for some immediate production starts calling out to you like the Green Goblin mask. And I try to resist that urge the best I can, unless I'm getting something at least close to the pre-injury price on these players. But not everyone is that patient and not everyone's that disciplined. So looking at this list, Malik Neighbors out for the season. Joe Burrow functionally out for the season. Brock Bowers should be back after the week 8 bye. But with him, there's a combination of the injury and then also a bit of a damaged perception because he played a few games when he was limited, didn't put up a lot of production, and now the offense and especially Geno Smith are looking pretty rough. So I think there's a clear buy window with him where he's just simply lost value since the start of the year for reasons that are mostly outside of his control. And then Hampton and Igbuka, these guys are tougher because they're going to be back this year. You know, they're not long-term injuries for these players, and they both looked great prior to the injury. So the managers that have these guys are likely going to be reluctant to move them, are probably expecting very good production when they do come back, but it's not impossible. I was able to get Amarian Hampton on a rebuilding team basically by swapping Devon Achane. There were some other pieces involved as well. You know, some of my like startable current production players for some other cheaper long-term plays, but that was the crux of the deal. Hampton for Achane, and that's not a bad formula if you're rebuilding, to take players you have that are in a similar tier and move them for an injured player with a plus on top, or to take a player in a tier below and try to trade them straight up for one of those guys. You know, if you have Igbuka, you could try something like Drake London for Igbuka plus. You could send Nico Collins for Igbuka and a plus. I would probably even do that straight up on a rebuilding team just because of the age difference. You could look at a Devon Achane, a Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, no one's going to want your garbagey, unproductive veteran assets. Don't try to send AJ Brown for Emeka Igbuka. But if you have these highly productive players, you can find some win-win deals here that will put you at a value advantage once the offseason rolls around. Now, one thing I'd like to avoid doing as a rebuilder, if you're pursuing these injured players, is trading your own first-round pick. And that certainly makes it harder to acquire them because that first-round pick is like a really strong foundational piece that can get you most of the way there. So you have to have players that you can use instead. But the problem with moving your first-round pick is that it isn't at its peak value right now. So yes, you can technically still get a value win out of a deal that involves sending your first with other pieces to get a Malik Neighbors or to get a Joe Burrow, but it's not going to be as big a win as it feels right now once your first round pick is locked into that really early spot, once it has accrued value over the course of the offseason. When you're sitting there in March, in April, looking at your rookie drafts, all of a sudden that's going to feel like a much closer deal. Sometimes you can even lose that deal. So I would try not to be sending your future first for these stars. Instead, I'd be trying to pivot off of productive players. If you have other people's picks that you can use and you think you're getting a discount, you can trade those picks. But otherwise, you want to be careful. And if you have a really low value team where potentially you're looking at a 2-year rebuild, or it's going to be really tight whether you can turn this thing around in one offseason, this is probably not the tier you want to be shopping in, because these are consolidation plays. You're taking a ton of value that you already have and you are consolidating it into one really productive asset. And the great thing is, it's hard to get these players when they're not injured. They're scarce assets. People don't want to trade them. So you have this unique opportunity to buy them when you don't need the points. But if you have a low value roster, it's kind of a luxury you can't afford. Where you might want to shop is in the wild cards tier. Now, these guys are probably going to be the most interesting names that we talk about today. They're all very different players, but I think you can make a good buy low argument for each one. And I'll start here with Spencer Rattler. Like I said at the beginning, Dynasty is a value game. Who gains more value more quickly than a young franchise quarterback? Just look at Jackson Dart. Look at his rise so far. I'm not saying it's likely that Spencer Rattler is Jackson Dart. I'm not saying it's even extremely likely that he becomes the long-term starter for the Saints, but I also won't say it's impossible. He has certainly played much better than anyone would have expected. Taysom Hill was named as the backup quarterback over Tyler Shuck in his first game back from injury as a 35-year-old tight end. So I think that tells you everything you need to know about Tyler Shuck's outlook. There's not a lot of threat there. Every week I see more and more tweets about how well Spencer Rattler's playing, how the Saints should try to build around him. And he's even running a little bit. He's had at least 20 rushing yards in 4 of his 6 games this year. So there's definitely some things to like here, and it can all come crumbling down in the offseason. If the Saints have a top 5, top 6 pick and they decide to go with a quarterback, then that's that. But I think he's a pretty interesting player to swing on at like late second round value, especially if you can get him without giving up a pick. If you can move a low end running back or a wide receiver starter, even a tight end, I guess, in tight end premium, somebody like a Dallas Goedert. Again, you're just trying to swing on value upside. And he's valued around a lot of players that are going to be worth a lot less when the season's over. He is one of the players in that range that could potentially gain a lot of value between now and the start of next year. Next, we'll talk about Isaiah Likely, who at various points in his career has been valued as a top 10 dynasty tight end based on his potential in a Ravens offense without Mark Andrews. Well, with every passing week, we do get closer to that reality. Every week we get closer to a world where Mark Andrews is not on the Ravens, and yet Likely seems to be an afterthought in a lot of dynasty leagues right now. Mark Andrews has been mostly ineffective this season. I won't say he's completely washed, but he looks certainly more washed than he has ever looked. And he's a guy who could be moved at the deadline. Even if he's not, I think it's very likely that he walks in free agency this offseason. It's clear this team is just about ready to move on from him. And I know that Isaiah Likely has just 3 receptions on the season, but he was out for the first 3 games due to a foot injury. He came back in the blowout loss against the Chiefs when Lamar got injured, which was frankly Lamar's worst game of the season by far. And he's played the last 2 games with Cooper Rush. So I'm not really holding the lack of production against him, given the injury, the offense being totally broken. We have seen the talent at times, what he brings to the table. Lamar Jackson's probably going to be back after the bye week to give this passing game a boost. And with such a terrible defense, the Ravens might be passing more than ever this year. I think Likely just is an obvious market play right now. And I even have my doubts about the ceiling case for Isaiah Likely, that he's actually capable of being a full-time tight end at a high level. I don't even know if I believe that. But if things play out right, you're going to have every opportunity to sell him for a significant profit before you have to worry about that, right? Like all it takes is for Isaiah Likely to have any type of production down the stretch here. And then for Mark Andrews to leave in free agency, that's it. You've got your profit. You can lock it in. You can go sell him for 2-3 times what you paid in the majority of leagues. Just the thought of Isaiah Likely as the week 1 starting tight end for the Ravens is going to get you there. And then we have Brandon Ayuk, who is a guy I've mostly been staying away from in Dynasty because I was worried that 2025 would be mostly a lost season for him, and that's certainly how it's shaping up so far. He's already missed more time than a lot of people expected him to, but now his value has fallen to a point where I think it is actually worth kicking the tires, seeing if you can go acquire Brandon Ayuk on the cheap. Because on Fantasy Calc right now, he's ranked behind Keon Coleman, he's behind Alvin Kamara, he's behind TJ Hawkinson, he's in the same range as Zach Charbonnet, Dallas Goedert, Khalil Shakir. It's funny to me that his value would be lowest when he's never been closer to returning. But regardless, this is the time to strike on Brandon Ayuk. He has fallen down and down and down as people get more and more impatient, as reports come out about the surgeries he's had or his slow recovery. But he's 27 right now on a long-term deal in a good offense. At his peak in 2023, he gave us 15.6 points per game. He was the wide receiver 16 that year. He had insane efficiency, over 3 yards per out run. I mean, he's a very, very good wide receiver. He always has been. In terms of his impact, not his playing style at all, but in terms of his impact, I think it can be similar to a Michael Pittman, right? Previously a very good wide receiver, currently in his prime, but he's kind of been left for dead due to an injury. I think he has a good chance to, maybe even contribute late this season in the fantasy playoffs. The 49ers are going to be really pass heavy because their defense is just decimated. If he can get back to form by the fantasy playoffs, he could be a pretty useful guy to start. But next year looks like a mid-range, potentially high-end wide receiver 2 type. That's a good bet and a good return on investment for what you would have to pay right now, most likely. Then we have Tyjae Spears. And, he was probably a better buy before he was back on the field. But even still, this Titans offense is so bad, it kind of masks all of the value that can be found in this offense. And he actually played more snaps than Tony Pollard this past week. He's the better pass catcher between the two. And Pollard has just, he hasn't been impressive this year. I don't think it's all his fault, but I think it's very possible the team just moves on from him. Next year, they're probably going to need to go with like a full youth movement. This team is just so bad. It's going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up around Cam Ward, Alec Ayomanor. Tyjae Spears feels like the guy that could step into maybe the 1A role in this backfield. I don't think he is a workhorse type. I don't think he's ever going to just own a backfield by himself, but he's a good pass catcher. He's elusive. I think he could become a lead, a starting back, and that would be a huge win for where he is right now, which is lower than that second round price range. Right? He's in kind of the third round range. There's plenty of dusty veterans that you could toss for a Tyjae Spears to just stash on your bench and kind of see what happens. And then closing out the wild cards tier, we have Jonathan Brooks. I briefly made the case for buying Brooks in last week's sells video when I was talking about Chuba Hubbard, but the Panthers can cut Hubbard and save about $14 million this offseason. And whether or not they choose to do that, Jonathan Brooks was a really exciting college prospect. He was drafted in the second round. He doesn't turn 23 years old until June, so he's still an insanely young player going into his third NFL season. And when week 1 comes around, he's going to be 21 months removed from that ACL tear. So there's no guarantees that he's going to be the same player. Right? When you suffer multiple devastating lower body injuries, that's always a risk. But it is reassuring that he's still so young, and you have to be encouraged by what Javonte has done, what J.K. Dobbins has been able to do after these huge injuries. And the best part is he's dirt cheap right now. He's definitely one of my favorite guys to have thrown into trades, to stash on IR. It's just like free rolling upside. And I do think the upside is pretty considerable with Jonathan Brooks. Buying low on struggling rookies is another solid option for really any team that can afford to do it, but especially rebuilding teams. This is a high risk, high reward proposition. It is not for the faint of heart. You have to accept that there is some chance of failure, that there's some chance these guys just don't turn it around. But a lot of these players are going to gain value at some point, and some of them are going to be mega hits relative to the price that you would pay today. Now, there are certainly a lot more struggling rookies than the ones that appear on the screen here, and I didn't include them. That doesn't mean I wouldn't buy low on those guys. I'm pretty open-minded when the price is low to just about any struggling rookies. But these are the players that I'd be most interested in, starting with the most valuable names in Travis Hunter and Trevion Henderson, Colson Loveland, Baishal Tuten, Kaleb Johnson, Jack Bech, Jaden Higgins, and Terrence Ferguson. There's obviously a wide range of values, price points here, but that also gives you options depending on your team build, depending on the amount of capital that you have to play with. If you are rebuilding or you're trending that way and you still have a lot of highly coveted productive assets to sell, you want to go after first round picks. You want to go after injured stars, but I do also like rolling the dice on someone like Travis Hunter or Trevion Henderson. With Hunter, he was obviously a miss for as high as he was drafted in rookie drafts. I was certainly wrong to be pushing him as high as I was, but you do see the talent with him every week. When the ball is in his hands, you can see why NFL evaluators were so high on this guy. I think it's just going to take him longer than I expected to really learn the position, but his route rate has been very high. We love that. He ran like 80% of the routes last week. I think over time, as he gets more comfortable with, the playbook, with all the different route concepts, I still think he's going to be really, really good. This just might be more of a year two breakout type of player, or at least late year one breakout type of player. But his value is falling so far. Like, he's on the late one fringe right now. I'm absolutely sending, late one caliber players. Like, you don't have to add that much more these days on top of like Michael Pittman, on top of Cortland Sutton to go out and get a Travis Hunter. That's such an obvious smash deal for really any team, but especially if you don't even need those points. Just go invest in the really, really young, really highly drafted rookie and just let things sort of work themselves out. With Henderson, I'm honestly worried, not by the usage, but more so what he's been able to do with his touches. I will say, I don't think the team is using him well. I think they should be designing more touches for him to get the ball in his hands. And I think they should stop just like running him up the middle all the time. But the blocking for the Patriots is bad, and there's still plenty of time for him to figure things out. There have been rookie running backs that really didn't look all that good for stretches of their rookie year. Honestly, Jonathan Taylor didn't really hit his stride until like halfway through his rookie season. So there's plenty of time for Henderson to figure things out. I wish it had happened faster. I wish he looked a little bit better, a little bit more explosive on his touches, but I'm not just throwing in the towel on him as an early second round pick in the draft. Colson Loveland, the usage is going to keep tilting away from Cole Kmet and towards Colson Loveland over the course of the year. I'd like to see him get some more targets, but I'm willing to be patient here. I still believe in the prospect profile. Then we come to Bech Tuten. I'm still fine with the process on this pick being high on Tuten because his worst case at this point is being a premium handcuff option. And ETN could still walk away in the offseason, leave Bech Tuten to inherit the starting role. He's looked really good when he's touched the ball. Like, let's not let Travis Etienne's career resurgence distract us from the fact that Tuten does look awesome. And he would be awesome as the lead back in this offense. I think Liam Cohen is willing to double down on a day three back. We saw him do it with Bucky Irving. It would not surprise me at all if ETN was able to sign a big contract elsewhere and this team rolled with, Bech Tuten, LaQuint Allen, and some other cheap veteran running back or rookie running back next year. That would be huge for his value. And again, every week that he doesn't produce, every week that he remains a backup, he just gets cheaper and cheaper to acquire, where the bet hasn't really changed all that much. And then these last four guys, Kaleb Johnson, Jack Bech, Jaden Higgins, Terrence Ferguson, they just haven't really gotten the playing time yet. And maybe they never truly do get enough run to hit in a big way. But I do think Jack Bech is interesting. He ran 80% of the routes in week 5. He finally broke into the lineup in a meaningful way. He seems to have overtaken Deontay Thornton finally. And now we have these trade rumors swirling around Jakobi Meyers. Seems like there's at least a decent chance that he gets moved to another team. It would make perfect sense for the Raiders. Like, they're not going anywhere this year. You might as well get something for Meyers while you can. Jack Bech can slide into that role. I'm not saying he would automatically succeed. I'm not saying he would be as good as Jakobi Meyers, but at least fits his play style, and he would have the opportunity to gain a lot of value. He was a second round pick in the draft. So it's like, you typically see those guys at least get a chance to prove that they're not good. And I think we will get the chance for Bech to get on the field, potentially prove himself later this year. Kaleb Johnson is so cheap right now. I wasn't even a Kaleb Johnson fan. He was one of the few fades that I actually got right this year. But at this point where you can sometimes get him for less than a second round pick, it finally feels like there's some potential upside here. Like, there's some meat on the bone for Kaleb Johnson to gain value. If he can just push Kenny Gainwell out of the way, or at least go into next year as the unquestioned RB2 or co-starter for this team, he's going to be more valuable than he is right now. He was a young rookie. He was drafted in the 3rd round. That's not nothing. feels very similar to maybe the Trey Benson career arc at this point. And we know that those people who stuck with Trey Benson eventually did get that value gain. It was cut short by an injury, but doesn't change the fact that it did sort of pay off to hold on to that third round back that wasn't super involved as a rookie, but stuck around, earned more trust, eventually was able to step into that starting role. And finally, today we come to the handcuffs. Most of the time, I'm not buying running backs if I'm not competing, because running backs score points, and there are other people that value points more highly than I do if I'm not competing. But like injured players, like underperforming rookies, handcuffs are another exception to that rule because they don't score points. I love getting handcuffs thrown into deals really all the time on any team. I want to have those types of contingent bets on my bench, but especially when I'm rebuilding, because again, they don't score points. They don't impact your win-loss record. They don't add max points for, but they're a really easy flip for profit if they hit. If you had Trey Benson on a rebuilder, James Conner goes down, boom, sell him for an early second. You just got your value win, right? A lot of these guys like Algier, Giddens, Sampson, Gordon, they're likely just going to carry the same value over to next year as they occupy the same role. You know, it's very likely we see Algier back behind Bijan Robinson. It's likely Giddens is still behind Taylor as the RB2, Sampson behind Judkins, Tracy behind Scadaboo. All of these guys are probably just going to carry that value over and be useful contingent upside bets for your contending team in the future. But there's also some players that have the upside to be more than that. Right? Kendre Miller could be the Saints starting running back next year. I don't think it's a terribly likely outcome, but if Kamara retires or Kamara moves on, Kendre Miller has been around. He looks okay. Tyler Algier, I think, is a free agent after this season. He could sign with another team and have a larger role. So there's multiple paths to winning with these guys. And it's not like it never, ever happens, right? Tony Pollard was one of these handcuffs that did become a starter. He had a chance to be the starter. So it can happen. I like investing in these players. And the nice thing is that managers are often pretty willing to throw these handcuffs into trades. Not if it's their own handcuff running back. Like if you're talking to the Bijan manager, don't ask for Algier. That's off limits. But if you're talking to the Bijan manager and they have DJ Giddens, they're not going to be nearly as attached to that player. And if you're offering something that they want, they're more likely going to be willing to throw in a player like that. And over time, you stack up enough of those bets, one or two of them is going to hit, and that's all that you need for it to be worthwhile. Anyway, that's going to do it for today, guys. Those are my buy low trade targets for the week. If you're competing, if you're rebuilding, I hope you'll send out some offers for these players. Hope you can get some deals done. And obviously, I hope over time, they do gain value for us. They make our Dynasty teams better. As always, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you enjoy my Dynasty content and you want to see more in the future, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It really goes a long way. And if you want even more content from me, you can also check out the membership options. Hit the plus button on the subscribe or the link in the description. You'll see all those perks, weekly live streams, private Discord channels, Dynasty rankings, all that good stuff. Either way, though, I'll be back soon with another Dynasty video, and hopefully I'll see you then.